Imagine sitting in a room and the air is just wonderfully comfortable, like a balmy plus 20 degrees Celsius. Now imagine that literally inches away, just outside the window, it's a lung-scraping, bitter minus 15 degrees. And here's the kicker, guys. There is no heater running, no firewood crackling, no radiator humming, absolutely no fossil fuels burning at all. I mean, it sounds like magic, right? But this extreme contrast is a very real, visceral reality in the high-altitude trans-Himalayan desert of Ladakh. We're talking about a harsh environment where the land is totally bare, water is locked up in ice for half the year, and temperatures routinely plummet to minus 30 in the dead of winter. To survive here, you absolutely need an intense understanding of the local context.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into an absolutely fascinating story of survival and innovation. We're going to see exactly how Ladakh is tackling modern crises, not by looking outward for some fancy high-tech solution, but by looking deeply inward. As you'll see, they're proving that indigenous wisdom in education and architecture is yielding results that our modern systems honestly just can't match.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the cost of alien systems, followed by Operation New Hope. Then, we'll explore the genius of mud and how they're engineering solar buildings. Finally, we'll wrap up with restorative development. Let's jump right into part 1, the cost of alien systems and the very real danger of disconnect. You know, when we just parachute systems that work in one part of the world into a completely different environment, the loss of context can be pretty disastrous. For decades, the modern Indian education system in Ladakh, which was really a legacy of old British colonial models, completely alienated local kids. Just picture this for a second. Young students living way up in the high Himalayas were being made to chant and memorize facts about the Taj Mahal, but they were taught absolutely nothing about the historic 9-story Leh Palace right in their own backyard. They were learning how hydrogen and oxygen atoms combine to form a molecule, but reading zero about how a local Ladakhi farm is actually watered using melting ice channeled from ancient glaciers. Their education was just completely severed from their everyday lived reality.
And because these kids were forced into a system that was completely foreign to their culture, and, by the way, taught in alien languages like Urdu and English instead of their mother tongue, they were basically set up to fail. And, unfortunately, fail they did. Historically, this disconnected system resulted in a staggering, heartbreaking 95% educational failure rate. 95%. School literally became a place for Ladakhi youth to forget, and actually even look down upon, their own traditional skills. This led to just a massive loss of self-reliance, self-esteem, and cultural identity.
Which brings us to our second section, Operation New Hope, and how they went about reclaiming education. Now, the community didn't just sit back and accept this massive failure. A group of students who were actually victims of this system themselves, led by an engineer named Sonam Wangchuk, decided to do something about it. They founded SECMOL, the Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh. They realized pretty quickly that true education in this intense environment had to go way beyond standard textbooks. As one of our sources points out, what the forefathers taught on surviving the extreme cold was based on their traditional and practical knowledge. SECMO realized that education needed to return to being a tool for practical survival, self-sufficiency, and harmony with that fierce Ladakhi landscape.
So, to make this happen, back in 1994, SECMOL launched what they called Operation New Hope to completely overhaul the public education system. They basically went in and systematically dismantled that alien framework. They formed village education committees, which meant parents were actually involved in the process. They developed highly contextualized, localized school textbooks, stuff the kids could actually relate to, you know? They also brought in creative, child-centric teaching methods to make schooling joyful rather than, well, painful. And ultimately, they successfully rebuilt the lost pride and self-confidence of the Ladakhi people, making their education culturally and environmentally relevant once again. It was a real game changer.
All right, let's pivot to the physical world in Section 3, the genius of mud, an architecture tuned to the sun.
Just as that alien education system failed the youth, imported modern building systems completely failed the broader community. Fast-paced modernization brought materials like cement, concrete, and corrugated iron sheets straight into Ladakh. People assumed, hey, it's modern, so it must be better, right? But concrete actually conducts heat away. This left residents freezing in minus 30-degree winters unless they burned massive and super expensive amounts of fossil fuels. The real solution? It was found right there in traditional Ladakhi design. The beating heart of this design is called the Robsol. It's this projecting, glazed, south or southeast-facing wooden window or balcony that acts as a brilliant passive solar sunroom. Because the air way up at 4,000 meters is so thin and dry, solar radiation is incredibly intense, even in the dead of winter. By orienting this glazed timber bay to the south, indigenous builders created a room that just drinks in all that low winter light.
It's usually attached to the formal sitting room, ensuring that the most prestigious space in the house is naturally bathed in free solar warmth.
Let's move along and see exactly how this builds up, because this thermal strategy actually extends all the way to the roof, which acts like a giant insulating blanket. Now, since there's almost zero rain up there, the roofs are flat, but they are built up in these very meticulous insulating layers. First, they lay down structural poplar beams. Across these, they weave a close mat of willow twigs, which they call talu, to form a solid base. Then comes a layer of Yaxchids grass specifically for insulation. Next up is rough soil just for bulk, followed by rammed, compacted earth for thermal mass. And finally, the whole shebang is sealed with a water-resistant skin of marca lactylate. The result? A super thick barrier overhead that stops all that precious solar heat from escaping into the freezing night sky. It's honestly brilliant.
Moving right along to Section 4, Engineering Solar Buildings and the Modern Hybrid.
You see, innovators like SECMOL and later the Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh, or HEAL, didn't just blindly copy the past. They engineered a really smart modern hybrid. To build these massive, award-winning, entirely fossil fuel-free campuses, they combined those indigenous principles, like high thermal mass, south-facing solar capture, and heavy insulation, with some seriously ingenious modern waste materials. For instance, they mix abundant local Ladakhi clay with agricultural straw waste that they actually rescue from being burned in Punjab. This creates lightweight, highly insulating blocks. And to hold the heat indoors, they insulate walls and ceilings with wood waste and leftover pashmina wool. Get this, they even use waste plastic water bottles, filling them up with water so they act as zero-cost thermal batteries. The water bottles just soak up the sun's heat during the day and slowly release it to warm up the room at night.
Now, what's really interesting about this data here is the sheer undeniable proof that this actually works in an experiment that compared different buildings during January, which is for sure Ladakh's coldest month. Unheated modern buildings sat freezing at -5 degrees. Meanwhile, conventional buildings that were actively burning highly polluting fossil fuels only managed to reach about +10 degrees. But those passive solar mud buildings, they stayed completely comfortable, sitting pretty between 18 to 25 degrees Celsius 90% of the time. This massive aha moment proves that indigenous passive solar technology absolutely crushes imported concrete construction in this kind of environment.
Which leads us perfectly into our final section, Section 5. Restorative development, looking back to move forward.
So this really brings our whole narrative full circle, whether we're talking about shaping a child's mind in a classroom or just keeping a family alive in -30-degree winters. The blind pursuit of what the outside world likes to call modernity can actually strip us of our context, our comfort, and our capabilities. True sustainability, guys, isn't some one-size-fits-all solution shipped in a box from a distant city. Restorative development means having the humility to look backward, looking back to those localized textbooks, to the rab cell sunrooms, to the layered earthen roofs, in order to move forward with solutions that actually practically work for the people and the planet. Ladakh is proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that modern doesn't automatically mean better, and traditional certainly doesn't mean obsolete.
As Sonam Wangchuk so powerfully puts it, this is not a story of just sustainable development. This is a story of restorative development, regenerative development, and that's what the planet needs now. By flat-out rejecting those disconnected, alien systems and enthusiastically embracing local, contextual wisdom, Ladakh isn't just saving itself. It's actually offering a crucial, highly successful model that the entire world can learn from.
It really makes you rethink the way we approach progress, doesn't it? I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. As we look at our own communities, our own schools, and our own buildings, in our relentless rush towards supposedly modern solutions, what vital indigenous wisdom are we foolishly leaving behind?